All right, welcome in to Purple Daily. Phil Mackey, Judd Zolga, Declan Goff producing, and just a quick thank you to Dennis Kirk, DennisKirk.com for supporting Score North and Purple Daily. If you are a bike rider of any kind, whether you ride a Harley, cruiser, sport bike, dirt bike, or any other type of motorcycle, they've got what you need, and they have parts available to be shipped. Order by 8 p.m. today. Get it tomorrow, and remember, $89 orders ship free at DennisKirk.com. And we're pumped here because we are football geeks. We are analytical geeks on this show. And Aaron Shotz is the creator and head of FootballOutsiders.com. He is essentially, and Football Outsiders, you can consider the OG of football analytics on the internet going back a number of years. And the 2020 Football Outsiders Almanac is out right now. Almost 300 pages of football stats, information, and projections injected into your veins, Vikings fans. You can order it at FootballOutsiders.com. And remember, a portion of every Football Outsiders Almanac sold will go to benefit the United Way Worldwide COVID-19 Community Response and Recovery Fund. Aaron, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me on. Actually, it's 500 pages. It's huge.
That's amazing.
Our book is good for killing mosquitoes. It not only contains football information, it also kills all those nasty bugs around your house.
Perfect. It's a dual purpose book. It's amazing. If you're short like me, you can stand on it. Yes. So I want to start out with sort of a broad question before we drill down on some different Vikings and football things. How do you and how do Football Outsiders view in general the Vikings in 2020? Because it's like they drafted 15 rookies. They're still in a win now window with their coach, with their quarterback, but they're in sort of a transition period. So how would you view the Vikings heading into 2020?
I think the summary of the chapter and the summary of how we see the Vikings is transition year. That, I mean, they may be in a win now mentality, but they're not in the best place to win now. That the salary cap piper kind of finally came and asked to be paid, and they did it, and they did it well. They're a well-managed franchise, and there's a lot of young talent there that's going to need to grow and develop over the next couple of years, but that this is sort of a retrenchment year, very likely, where they come back to the pack, and then their next big window of opportunity starts in 2021.
What does the transition year mean, though? Because this league is weird, and weird things happen.
And this year is going to be the weirdest.
Right. So like if you said that ordinarily about baseball, you'd say probably down year for said team, Aaron. But when we're talking about this league, and to your point, this year, what does that word mean to you as far as the Vikings' chances?
I mean, the most likely record we have for them is 8-8, but our projections tend to group around 8-8 because our projections are somewhat conservative. We have the whole division basically grouped around 8-8. In our simulations, every team in the NFC North wins the division at least 23% of the time. So it's like the closest division in football. So, I mean, we see them as a less likely playoff team, but it's not out of the realm of possibility, certainly. We see the defense in particular coming back to the pack because of the talent that's been lost on the defense and a couple of sort of regression stats that kind of blink loudly. They were very high last year in takeaways per drive. That tends to regress. They were the best team in the league stopping runs in short yardage. That tends to regress a little bit. So we see the defense declining, which brings the whole team back to the pack. But not like a rebuilding year, like a 5-11 rebuilding year, very likely. More like 8-8, which puts you in the playoff race in what we see as a very tight, mediocre division.
Aaron, on Kirk Cousins. So Football Outsiders liked, but maybe didn't love Kirk Cousins in 2019, which is sort of how we feel about him, watching him on a weekly basis here. And that you can justify him being a fringe top 10 quarterback with various metrics and measurements, but there's just there are things that mobility lacks, and there's some big game issues with him. So when it comes to Kirk Cousins, I guess my specific question to you is, how much more room is there for him to get better, or is what we saw in 2019 sort of the ceiling for Kirk Cousins in the mind of you and Football Outsiders?
I mean, I think by the time a quarterback reaches this age, we know what they are. Now, obviously, some guys will sometimes, there's a lot of randomness in the NFL. Guys will have amazing years out of nowhere. I think about Steve Berline with like 2001 Carolina Panthers, was like 37 years old and all of a sudden had by far the best season of his career. So those things happen. But for the most part, I think Kirk Cousins is exactly the guy you said. I don't think that there's a player in the NFL with a bigger sort of gap between how scouts see him and how advanced stats see him than Kirk Cousins, right? Because like you said, almost every advanced stat metric that's out there sees Kirk Cousins as a borderline top 10 quarterback. And yet scouts will go in depth about how he misses throws, he misses plays, he doesn't see things, he's not that great under pressure. Like they'll go on and on about his deficiencies, and yet the results come out strong. So, I mean, I think he's better than people give him credit for, but I also don't think there's a big jump coming, especially without Stephon Diggs. I mean, he's missing his best receiver from the last couple of years.
Do you pay Dalvin Cook?
No. I'm not a believer in paying running backs at all. Even Christian McCaffrey, who last year had the most valuable year by any running back by our numbers of the decade. It's just, yes, one of these times, one of these second running back contracts is going to work out. One of them is going to be worth it. And everybody will point to it and say, see, we told you running back contracts are still valuable. But the fact is most of them are not. And it's a complicated story because you want these guys to get paid. It's not like they don't work hard and go through a lot of, they take a lot of hits. They go through a lot of violence to play the running back position. But the only way to do it in a way that's economically efficient for teams is to somehow pay running backs more on their first contract than other positions get paid. I'm not sure how you make that work with the Players Association, but there's just no question. Paying running backs big money on a second contract almost never works. I mean, so far it basically never works, but at some point it will work.
And that's what the Vikings are trying to figure this out with Dalvin Cook right now. And fans love him. He's obviously one of the best running backs in the NFL. But is there a way, does Football Outsiders have a way to, whether it's some sort of win value or some other metric? Alex Madison is the backup running back. He averaged 4.5 yards a carry. He wasn't as dynamic, at least to the naked eye. But if the Vikings were to replace Dalvin Cook with an Alex Madison type that is fine, what sort of are they losing a half win? Like what is the impact on the actual outcome of their record if they were to make that swap after this year?
I mean, unfortunately, we don't do things that intricately to try to declare the specific value of wins of players, but I doubt that any running back would be worth even a half win in the NFL. Madison's a good running back, right? He had a good performance last year. He had a low success rate, which means he was inconsistent from carry to carry, but he had reasonable stats overall because when he had big runs, they were pretty big. So, I don't think that you really lose that much by going from Cook to Madison. There just doesn't seem to be any indication in any of the research that's done that you lose that much by going to a backup running back, even when you have a guy who you think is one of the top running backs in the league.
I go with gut. You go with facts. Tell me this. Is my gut right in saying that the Packers, coming off a 13-win season, did not feel like a 13-win team?
No, in fact, by our numbers, they were, I believe, the second lowest team in our DVOA stat to ever go 13-3.
Wow.
So they played much more.
My gut was right. It's big. It goes right.
Points scored and allowed. They were much more like a 10-6 team.
Yes.
And then you look at sort of how they've performed in the past and the idea of certain, the way trends work from year to year. Their defense took a big improvement last year, so they likely come back a little bit. And then you look at their draft picks, and they didn't really improve the holes on the team, right? They took a quarterback, which may help them down the line. We can argue about Jordan Love. We're not big fans of his, but we can argue about that, but it's not meant to help this year. They took a running back, which they already had a really good running back, so there's really no major improvement that this year in that position. And they took a fullback, H-back type, that doesn't move the needle very much. So, you have a team that didn't really improve much, that's already going to kind of come back to previous performance and wasn't as good as their record anyway last year. So that's one of the reasons why I talk about the NFC North being mediocre overall, is because we have both the Packers and the Vikings coming back towards 8-8, and in particular the Packers, because they didn't play. The underlying numbers were nowhere near as good as 13-3.
Yeah. Aaron, one thing we talk about a lot here following the Vikings is we like Mike Zimmer. We like Gary Kubiak in general. They bring a lot of stability. We wonder if those two guys and the approach is the best way to go about 2020 NFL football. And I know Football Outsiders does a lot of reporting and statistical diving into percentage of run versus pass in different situations. What can you tell us about Gary Kubiak and his offensive style as it pertains to what works in 2020 in the NFL?
I mean, the fact is Kubiak likes to run the ball, right? And we know that in general, the pass is more efficient than the run. And we would suggest that teams should pass the ball more. And in particular, based on what the defense is doing, if the defense is putting a lot of men in the box, pass it. So you don't want Dalvin Cook slamming into an 8-man box again and again. That being said, I mean, they have increased over the last couple of years the amount of play action passing that they use. We're big fans of that. They've even quoted, Kirk Cousins has talked about the fact that they did that in part because of analytics, suggesting that play action passes are really positive. Mm-hmm. So that's been a really good development. So it's sort of a little of the good and a little of the bad when it comes to sort of Kubiak play calling philosophy. I would go more pass heavy. All the research shows you don't have to actually run the ball that much in order to make play action work. As long as there is some threat that you're going to run the ball, the play action will work.
Vikings O-line in the work that you have done is how good and or bad going into 2020, do you think?
Well, the complication is that, all the O-line stats that we have are somewhat dependent on the other players, right? We have them as sort of average run blocking, a little bit better than that last year, but a little bit worse than that the year before. We have them as sort of average in pass blocking. In blown blocks, they come out as a little bit below average. There were particular weaknesses at the guard positions last year. So, I think that they're kind of an average offensive line.
And you know what? I think we would probably, if you said average offensive line or door number 2, we would probably just say we'll take that in general in the Twin Cities. Again, if you want to dive into 500 pages of football analytical glory, the 2020 Football Outsiders Almanac is available. FootballOutsiders.com, and a portion of every almanac sold will go to benefit the United Way Worldwide COVID-19 Community Response and Recovery Fund. Aaron, it's been awesome talking Vikings and analytics with you. We appreciate it, man.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me on, and good luck to the team this year. Hopefully there's a season to have good luck in.
Exactly. That is Aaron Shotz, and let's keep it right here on Purple Daily so we can react to just some of the things we talked about with Aaron. First and foremost, Judd, from an analytical standpoint, the Dalvin Cook question was very easy for Aaron to answer, which, do you pay Dalvin Cook? And without hesitation, based on years and years of running back research, he said, no, don't pay him. And I've kind of been waffling a little bit in that I don't want to pay him $12 or $13 million, or I don't want to pay him top 5 running back money. But if he wants to make $8 or $9 million, after listening to Aaron talk, I'm even waffling on like $8 or $9 million.
Are you really?
Because I just think, like, if you can take
short term though, 3-year deal.
Is 3 years short term? The NFL is 3 years short term.
I think if you could get out after 2 years, I mean that's my thing is the term. Because I'd for sure do the $8 million deal for 2020. I think I can get through 2021. But yeah, here's what I think. Because the league is never going to go for a rookie running back contract is this much, and everybody else doesn't get money, right?
Can you imagine? Oh my God.
Here's where I think this conversation, the more thought I give this guys, needs to go. If you are an agent, you need to do what we have seen agents trying to do with tight ends of late. I need my guy to be declared positionless. McCaffrey's not a running back really, right? I mean, he catches a ton of passes, but this is where, again, I'll go back to my question to Kubiak and company is, how are you going to use Dalvin? Because if you're going to give him the ball and he's going to pound the rock, no, that does not work. But from all sides, if he's going to catch a ton of passes and he's going to run the ball and he's going to line up in the backfield 2 plays and then the slot, the 3rd play, I literally have created a positionless player. Now I can put a value on that I can't put on a straight running back. I really believe that this conversation about this position, given the parameters of how we all basically say don't pay it, has to change based on the position that we call it.
Yeah.
Or don't call it.
Yeah, it's
a problem.
It's tough, but listen, Aaron Shotz and Football Outsiders have been doing research on this exact topic for years. And for him to basically say the Vikings aren't going to lose much, just forget about money for a second. If they just go from Dalvin Cook to Alex Madison, you're talking, I don't know, maybe a half win over the course of a season. And then the money that you save, being able to pump it into positions that could actually help you win more games.
Yes.
So it's tough because Dalvin Cook is amazing and no one's trying to take anything away from how great he is at his position. It's just sort of a marginalized position in the NFL.
How are we going to describe when it's all said and done with him? How are we going to describe, given what Aaron said about Kirk Cousins, how are we going to describe Kirk? Because like everything Aaron said is what we've been saying and running through. Like this is a complicated kid.
I don't think,
in some ways,
Kirk Cousins is one of the 12 best quarterbacks in the world, potentially. I think he is standing, if there's a line to be drawn of who should you be paying a super high percentage of your salary cap to in the NFL at that position, I think he is standing at the ticket the ticket window and he doesn't get my ticket. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's really good. I am glad that the Vikings don't have just an absolute cesspool train wreck at that position like they had, with Christian Ponder and, Tavares Jackson.
All the quarterbacks I've liked. Yeah.
Pretty much like
Matt
Josh
Castle,
Freeman.
Yeah. Like Matt Castle.
But I also think like he's not good enough to make that much of a percentage of the cap. Your roster building has to be so perfectly flawless around him to win a Super Bowl. That's the challenge.
I think that Kirk is the kid who is great in school and he gets A's and you're like, what a student. He's going to be outstanding. And then you throw him into a real world job and he's okay.
I thought you were going to say, and then he goes out the deep end and like develops a heroin problem.
No. He is, but I really think like he is
his parents sheltered
an
him.
A student in school, in high school, in college. He gets great grades. He studies. He means well. He works hard. And you think, okay, now he's got his big job and it's going to be great.
And he can't present to the CEO.
Yeah, and he's just not that good. He's just
You like that?
I'm underwhelmed.
Yeah, I don't hate the analogy. That's a wrap on this episode of Purple Daily. We thank Aaron Shotz for spreading some football geekery around the show here. And we urge you to subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily Vikings content, youtube.com/scorenorth, and we'll see you next time.